The one and only Robert De Niro, one of the greatest actors of his generation, has 9 Oscar nominations to his name. Which of his nominations do I think are the best, and which one is kind of the worst? Hi, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender, and it's time for my Oscar ranking video about Robert De Niro. Let's start with number 9, Best Picture, The Irishman. So basically I have this one at the bottom because it's a producing credit and not an acting credit. Like I did in the Emma Stone Oscar ranking video, I feel like if you're most known as an actor, then a lone Oscar nomination for producing goes at the bottom. This has nothing to do with the quality of The Irishman, Martin Scorsese's epic film from 2019. That is a fantastic movie with amazing performances from Joe Pesci and Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in the lead role. I thought De Niro was fantastic in that movie, and it's kind of weird when you think back to that award season. I think De Niro only got into Best Actor at Critics' Choice. Like, he missed at SAG, he missed at the Oscars. In Best Actor, he would have been a great nominee there, but the category, let's be honest, was very stacked. I mean, Taron Egerton couldn't make the final 5 at the Oscars for Rocketman after he won at Golden Globes and got in at SAG. So Robert De Niro wasn't very close to making the final 5 for The Irishman, but that is a wonderful movie. He is great in it, and I'm happy he got an Oscar nomination for it in some regard. Number 8, Best Actor, Awakenings.
Sickness took me out of the world, and I fought to come back. I fought for 30 years. 30 years.
So what is Robert De Niro's worst acting Oscar nomination? It's hard to make the call because there's not a bad performance here. Of those 8 nominations for acting, going from the 1970s all the way to this year, when he was nominated for Killers of the Flower Moon, like, there's not a terrible performance here. There's not a performance where it's like, oh God, he got nominated for that. Like, the Academy did the right thing and not nominate Robert De Niro for some of those terrible films he made in the 2000s and the 2010s. Like, there wasn't much to nominate him for in the last 15 years, really. But in the 70s and 80s and 90s, this guy was giving one phenomenal performance after another. And what makes me not like his nomination for Awakening so much is that when you think about his output in the 80s and 90s, specifically, all the amazing performances he gave in those 2 decades that did not get an Oscar nomination. I mean, just think of 1995, when he had not 1 but 2 banger performances in Heat and Casino. Doesn't get nominated for either one. And like, one of his 2 Oscar nominations in the 90s is for Awakenings. Okay, it's fine. His performance as a catatonic patient opposite Robin Williams, like, has elements to like about it. It's kind of against type from the other performances he was doing at the time. But I feel like there's 2 flaws for this particular Oscar nomination for De Niro. The first one is, I feel like if this movie was going to get a Best Actor Oscar nomination, it should have gone to Robin Williams, who was doing very well with the Academy around this time, nominated in Best Actor for Good Morning Vietnam, and then 2 years after that for Dead Poets Society, and then 2 years after that for The Fisher King. Like, they were really digging his work around this time, and Williams got the Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. So it seems like Williams might have come close to an Oscar nomination too, but ultimately they go with the more Oscar-baity performance by De Niro. And what also makes this kind of frustrating for me is that one of my favorite movies of all time is Goodfellas from 1990. I do think that's Martin Scorsese's finest hour. And I feel like if De Niro is going to get an Oscar nomination for a film he made in 1990, I don't know about you, but I think it should have been for Goodfellas and not Awakenings. Number 7, Best Supporting Actor, Silver Linings Playbook.
I'm going to do everything I can to help you get back on your feet. That's the whole point. Yeah.
So as I just mentioned, De Niro's work in film, starting around the year 2000, the rest of that decade, was pretty lackluster and overly prolific to the point where it was like, okay, De Niro, take some time off, read a good script. Like, you don't need to be in 5 movies a year, and most of them are just like so-so or really bad comedies. Like, something happened to De Niro in the 2000s. He needed to pay some bills. I don't know. But like, you look at his output for decades and it's so monumentally great. And then basically after Rocky and Bullwinkle, outside of the occasional anomaly, like sometimes he's in a good drama here and there, it took until 2012, Silver Linings Playbook, for his glorious return to dramatic acting in a strong film. And De Niro is excellent in that movie. As Bradley Cooper's dad, he shows strength and vulnerability and hostility, and it's one of his better performances of the last 20 years easily. Like, I remember watching Silver Linings Playbook in the theater and being like, oh right, De Niro, like, you're really, really good. We haven't seen this side of you for a while. Like, it had been since like Jackie Brown, Ronin, since I'd really adored one of his performances. I didn't love everything about Silver Linings Playbook. I don't think it needed to get into the Oscars as much as it did, but that De Niro nomination was well deserved. And going into the night in early 2013, I thought Robert De Niro could pull off a surprise victory. He had not been nominated for 21 years, and Silver Linings Playbook was so beloved that season, and Best Supporting Actor was so chaotic. Like, different people were winning at different ceremonies, at SAG and Critics' Choice and BAFTA, it was different people. So I thought maybe De Niro will win this. Like, it could happen, but no, it went to Christoph Waltz for Django Unchained, and yeah, this isn't one of De Niro's finest nominations, but it's still a very good one. Number 6, Best Actor, Cape Fear.
And with the power vested me by the kingdom of God, I sent you to the ninth circle of hell!
Boy, did Robert De Niro pick the wrong year to get an Oscar nomination for playing a villain. A villain in Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear opposite Nick Nolte. That was not really a big Oscar movie. I would say in Scorsese's long career, of the films he's made that weren't really expected to get many Oscar nominations, Cape Fear was definitely one of them. That was more a genre film, a thriller to entertain audiences. So it is kind of surprising in a way that De Niro got a Best Actor nomination for that performance, which is a fantastic one. But this is the same year that Anthony Hopkins wins his all-timer Best Actor Oscar trophy for playing Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. So there was no way in hell De Niro had a shot here. He's probably in 5th place in that category. Like, Nick Nolte, his co-star from Cape Fear, is nominated for The Prince of Tides, and he won at Golden Globes, so Nolte was probably in 2nd. But I say this all the time, I love when a genre performance breaks through at the Oscars. This is a turn by De Niro that easily could have been ignored by the Academy. I mean, he hadn't been nominated for much since Raging Bull, Just Awakenings the year before. I wonder if his Oscar nomination for Awakenings helped him get the nom for Cape Fear 1 year later. I don't know. But he is deliciously evil, sinister in that movie. You cannot take your eyes away from him. The way he interacts with Nolte and Jessica Lange and Juliette Lewis. Like Juliette Lewis, who's also fantastic in that movie and got an Oscar nomination in Best Supporting Actress. And that finale, oh boy, that finale, the 3rd act of Cape Fear, Robert De Niro is bringing it. And this is another Oscar nomination for De Niro that I love. Number 5, Best Supporting Actor, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Artist, I have many friends. Many, many friends. That means I have the best attorneys. They protect me. They're going to protect you.
Now, I surprised even myself a little bit making this ranking video that I have this nomination as high as it is, because I was kind of an outlier last award season in that I didn't much care for Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's latest film that got into the Oscars in a variety of categories. I admired it on a technical level, and it has some wonderful performances in it. DiCaprio, Gladstone, and especially De Niro. Like, whenever Robert De Niro was in Killers of the Flower Moon, I was sitting upright. I was into it. Like, I was into the movie for the most part when De Niro was on screen. I said it in my video review, and I still think it now. Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon gives his best performance since Casino, 29 years ago. Like, I think he was that good. This was a different kind of De Niro than we've had in a long time. He is not messing around with that character. He is not phoning this one in at all. He's soft-spoken, seems like a warm guy in those early scenes, but as the movie goes on, we learn more and more about what makes this guy tick, and it's not all good things. Like, he has a very dark side to him that slowly rises to the surface. I thought it was a very lovely, complex performance by De Niro. I was so happy to see him get in everywhere, from Golden Globes to the Oscars. That was a very well-deserved Oscar nomination in Best Supporting Actor. It's a bummer he couldn't win anything. Everybody decided this was Robert Downey Jr.'s moment for Oppenheimer. He completely swept the season. He left everybody in the dust. Nobody had a chance to overtake him. Not Ryan Gosling for Barbie or Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. Like, there were some wonderful performances this last year in supporting actor, and De Niro was one of them. Honestly, I still would have celebrated a win for De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon, but instead, at every single ceremony, he had to hear, the winner is Robert Downey Jr. Number 4, Best Actor, The Deer Hunter.
Nicky! Nicky! No! Nick! No!
Alright, now with the final 4, we're getting into the big ones, like his most famous performances in the history of cinema, going back to the earlier years of his career when he was giving us just one phenomenal performance after another from the mid-1970s to the early 1980s. Like, this is his landmark period, but interestingly enough, even though Robert De Niro gets an Oscar nomination every 2 years, between 1975 and 1981, he only shows up to the ceremony one time. Of those 4 nominations that I'm going to talk about for the rest of the video, he's only physically there for his Raging Bull win. He's not there for The Godfather Part II. He's not there for Taxi Driver. And he's not there for The Deer Hunter. Now, I know he couldn't accept his Best Supporting Actor trophy for The Godfather Part II because he was overseas filming. I don't know if he was filming the nights of his Oscar nominations for Taxi Driver or The Deer Hunter, but especially because he's also not there for his Oscar nominations for Awakenings and Cape Fear. I do get the sense that De Niro didn't much care for the Oscars. I mean, something obviously flipped because he's everywhere for Silver Linings Playbook and The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon. He's presenting, he's in the audience. Whenever he's a nominee for something, he's there. So I don't know what changed, but in the 20th century, he is basically MIA at the Oscars, and that was the case for his amazing performance nomination for The Deer Hunter from 1978, the 3-hour epic directed by Michael Cimino that also features Meryl Streep in an early role, her first Oscar nomination, and Christopher Walken, who won Best Supporting Actor that year. The Deer Hunter went on to win Best Picture and Best Director, so I would say this is the closest De Niro came to winning an Academy Award. Like, he was probably in second place, just behind Jon Voight for Coming Home. That was another admired war film about Vietnam from the same year. I don't know about you, but my vote easily would have gone for De Niro. The very deliberate 3-act structure of The Deer Hunter makes all of the characters very complex. I mean, most of the first hour is a long wedding sequence, and then the second hour is them at war, and then the third hour is them coming home and dealing with the aftermath. And at the Oscars, one thing that might have hurt De Niro a little bit is that the really emotional standout performance in that film is Christopher Walken. Like, his third hour in that movie is devastating. Like, when you walk out of that film, you're thinking about Walken's performance more so than De Niro's. And so probably some Academy members decided to give their votes in acting to that movie for Walken. But still, in The Deer Hunter, De Niro is on another level. I think that is one of the most magnificent performances in film in the 1970s. Number 3, Best Supporting Actor, The Godfather Part II.
Ha ragione io, Coelho. Lasciate fare a me. I take everything.
So Robert De Niro had been acting for a while in the 60s, into the early 70s. He's in films, but he didn't have his breakthrough until Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets in 1973. He is so bonkers great in that movie. He is funny, he is electric, like he really creates an original character in Mean Streets. And then a year later, we get a totally polar opposite kind of performance from De Niro, playing a young Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part II. I cannot imagine how intimidating it must have been to step into a character that had just been played by Marlon Brando as an older man in the first Godfather movie, a performance that won Brando a Best Actor Academy Award. Like, for Robert De Niro to take on that role and do it well, do it justice, do his own thing, not imitate Brando, find a balance so we believe it's him, but also give his own interpretation of the character. De Niro is flawless in The Godfather Part II. I just watched it again a few weeks ago and fell in love with this movie all over again. The back and forth between Pacino and De Niro for 3.5 hours is a joy. Everything about this movie works, from the acting, to the narrative, to the cinematography, the pacing, the sense of place. Francis Ford Coppola does not make a false move in The Godfather Part II, and one of the best things he did, I believe, was casting Robert De Niro. He could have gone for a bigger name. Most of the world, I would imagine, didn't really know De Niro's work. In 1974, as I said, he had been in movies, but he was still kind of new to the scene, and I feel like him not being Robert De Niro yet, like the great Robert De Niro, did help in making this performance so seamless in The Godfather Part II. Vito Corleone is such a complicated, fascinating character, and what I love so much about the De Niro performance in this film is how he underplays it. It's kind of a subtle performance, like even in his moments of rage or emotion, like De Niro could have gone to level 10, and he always stays around like level 4, level 5. He always keeps things grounded and real, even in his most intense moments where he's shooting and killing somebody. I just adore this performance. I'm so happy he won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for The Godfather Part II.
I think Robert De Niro is an extraordinary actor, and he is going to enrich the films that are made for years to come.
Number 2, Best Actor, Taxi Driver.
You talking to me? Well, then who the hell else are you talking? You talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here.
When you think about landmark movies of the 1970s, a few titles come to mind for me. I mean, obviously, the Godfather films, and All the President's Men, and Network, and Jaws. Star Wars, of course, duh. But right up there for me is Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese. That film is incredible in every way. I probably revisit it once every 3 or 4 years, and I'm always brought back under its spell. This is such a haunting film. The very unusual narrative that goes to places you don't expect. Like, there are moments where it seems to be veering into like romantic comedy territory. And then by the final half hour, it's like nihilism and death and destruction and tragedy. And it's like a roller coaster ride. You don't know where this narrative is headed, one scene to the next. And it's so beautifully shot. Like, the cinematography of Taxi Driver gets me every time. Obviously, the writing and the directing, and that beautiful score by Bernard Herrmann, his last score he composed right before he died. And these performances are just top notch. I mean, Albert Brooks, who's very funny, Sybil Shepherd, who's very appealing in this, and Harvey Keitel. Obviously, he had been working a lot with Scorsese at this time. Jodie Foster gives one of the finest performances I've ever seen from a younger actor. Like, she was doing mostly Disney movies around this time, but boy, did she take on this role with gusto, give it her all. And then Robert De Niro, holy shit. I mean, outside of his performance, we're going to talk about in a second, I do think the defining Robert De Niro character in his long and celebrated career is Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. This was the film and performance, I would say, that truly made him a star, an actor that we were going to follow everything he does next. This character has so many layers. He's so interesting, the way he interacts with the Jodie Foster character, his little quirks and obsessions, the way he descends into madness in the second half is just a total thrill to watch. And then, of course, there's that famous "Are you talking to me" scene. Like, Taxi Driver is essential Robert De Niro viewing. I'm so happy he got a Best Actor Oscar nomination. It's not a surprise why he didn't win for this one. That was the year of Peter Finch in Network, one of my favorite performances of all time. He had just recently passed away, tragically, and I'm always so happy Finch won his posthumous Oscar for that marvelous performance. But Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, it's about as good as it gets. Well, I guess not quite as good as it gets, since there is another performance I'm ranking at number 1. This is one of the best performances in the history of cinema. My number 1 choice for the finest Robert De Niro Oscar nomination is, of course, Best Actor, Raging Bull. I mean, what is there to say about Robert De Niro's landmark, brilliant performance as Jake LaMotta in Martin Scorsese's 1980 black and white masterpiece, Raging Bull? He is engaging, devastating, unpredictable, a showstopper, a knockout. The physical transformation he has as the young, fit boxer to the older, fat, has-been. It is one of the most remarkable physical transformations we've ever gotten in the movies, and to know that it's real, like he actually spent a few months filling up on pasta and then came back looking the way he does, it's just so impressive. And then you have the emotional transformation, the layers of this character, the self-sabotage. Robert De Niro is absolutely mind-blowing in Raging Bull, and on top of his amazing performance, you also have just a terrific movie, incredibly well-staged and edited boxing scenes. The performances from Kathy Moriarty and Joe Pesci are wonderful. The gorgeous black and white cinematography draws me in every time. The score, the sound, that haunting story always gets me. By the end of Raging Bull, you have been on a journey. But none of it works without that Robert De Niro performance. This was the right actor at the right time for that character under the direction of Martin Scorsese. You just can't go wrong. And so what an all-timer Oscar win this was for De Niro in Best Actor. I mean, I don't think he had any competition, really. I would say only John Hurt for The Elephant Man. I love that performance too. He would have my second place vote. But seriously, nobody was beating De Niro for Best Actor that year. I think that's why he's there. As I mentioned before, in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, he's never really at the Oscars like so many nominations and he's not in the audience, but he was there to collect his gold trophy for Raging Bull. He knew he was winning that night. And so he gives a terrific speech for what I think is one of the best acting Oscar wins of all time.
And I hope that I can share this with anyone that it means anything to, and the rest of the world, and especially all the terrible things that are happening. And I love everyone.
Now, if I could give Robert De Niro one more Oscar nomination in his long career, I could pick Casino or Heat. I could go with Jackie Brown. I think he's really fantastic in that film. But I would actually go for his follow-up to Raging Bull with Martin Scorsese. It was a flop at the time. Not everybody liked it, but it is one of my favorite Scorsese movies and one of my favorite De Niro performances. Rupert Pupkin in The King of Comedy.
And what about the time I gave you my last album of The Best of Jerry? What about that? It wasn't anybody else, it was me, and I didn't even ask you for money, and I can't even pay my rent!
He is dazzling in that movie. He is so funny and twisted and confused and frightened, but also with a sense of competence in that third act that just makes the ending of that film so memorable. I do think The King of Comedy was way ahead of its time. If that had come out in the 90s or 2000s, I think it would have been appreciated more. But in 1983, people were like, what is this? From the same guys who made Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. They and Academy members did not realize that Robert De Niro was giving one of his most phenomenal original performances of his long career in The King of Comedy. And now, to end, here is my final ranking. Number 9, Best Picture, The Irishman. Number 8, Best Actor, Awakenings. Number 7, Best Supporting Actor, Silver Linings Playbook. Number 6, Best Actor, Cape Fear. Number 5, Best Supporting Actor, Killers of the Flower Moon. Number 4, Best Actor, The Deer Hunter. Number 3, Best Supporting Actor, The Godfather Part II. Number 2, Best Actor, Taxi Driver. And number 1, Best Actor, Raging Bull. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below what would be your Oscar ranking for the great Robert De Niro, and we'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.